Have you ever felt yourself pulling away when someone tries to get too close, even though all you really want is to be loved? What if I told you that this fear of intimacy, this instinct to hide behind emotional walls, isn't your fault, but something deeply rooted in your past? Today, we're going to uncover the hidden wounds of avoidant attachment trauma, and I'm going to show you how you can start healing, breaking free from those walls, and finally experiencing the love and connection you truly deserve. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to dive deep into one of the most critical aspects of our emotional lives, the bonds that shape our connections with others, and more importantly, how we can heal from the wounds of avoidant attachment trauma. Whether we're aware of it or not, our childhood experiences, relationships, and even our daily choices are profoundly influenced by how we connect with the people around us. Now, what does it mean when we talk about avoidant attachment trauma? It's when, as children, our emotional needs were not met, or when we learned that seeking closeness or affection might lead to rejection, neglect, or even abandonment. Over time, this trauma builds walls in our hearts and minds, walls that prevent us from forming meaningful connections with others and sometimes with ourselves. But here's the good news. Healing is not just possible, it's within our reach. And today, I'm going to guide you through how to begin breaking down those walls, how to reconnect with the love and support that we all deserve, and how to rebuild trust, not just with others, but with ourselves. Healing from avoidant attachment trauma begins with a deep understanding of the patterns and behaviors that stem from this attachment style. The first critical step in the healing process is awareness, and awareness that goes beyond simply recognizing how we feel in our relationships, but also understanding why we react the way we do. If you've ever felt the instinct to withdraw when someone gets too close, or if intimacy and vulnerability make you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, these are signs of avoidant attachment, and recognizing them is your gateway to profound healing. Avoidant attachment is often rooted in early childhood experiences where emotional needs were not consistently met. Perhaps as a child, you were taught that expressing emotions was a weakness, or that your needs for comfort, closeness, or affection would either go unmet or lead to rejection. Over time, this reinforced belief that it's safer to remain distant rather than expose vulnerability, and this survival mechanism continues into adulthood. It manifests in various ways, avoiding emotional closeness, keeping others at arm's length, or even retreating when things begin to get too intimate. Many of us with avoidant attachment trauma do not even realize that we are in this pattern. Our reactions feel automatic and instinctual, but when we become aware of them, we start to see that these behaviors are not rooted in the present. They are echoes from the past, stemming from old wounds that have yet to be healed. This recognition brings clarity. Once we can see these patterns, we can start to ask ourselves deeper questions. Why do I push people away? Why do I find it difficult to rely on others? Why do I feel uncomfortable when someone expresses affection toward me? Understanding the root causes of these behaviors helps us separate who we are today from the survival strategies we've developed over the years. Awareness also allows us to stop the cycle of self-sabotage. When we're unaware of the emotional walls we've built, we end up repeating the same patterns in our relationships. We create distance, we reject love, and we push others away in subtle, sometimes unconscious ways. But when we shine a light on those patterns, we take the power away from them. We are no longer passive participants in our relationships. Instead, we become active creators of them. Moreover, awareness provides an opportunity for self-compassion. It's easy to fall into the trap of self-criticism, thinking that we are broken or incapable of forming healthy relationships. However, when we understand that these behaviors are the result of past trauma, we begin to feel compassion for ourselves. We can see that these patterns were never about us being unworthy or unlovable, but rather about the defense mechanisms we built to protect ourselves from pain. Finally, once we recognize these patterns and behaviors, we can begin to make different choices. We may not be able to change everything overnight, but the first step is always understanding what's happening. From there, we can learn how to approach relationships differently. Instead of pushing people away, we can challenge ourselves to lean in, to practice vulnerability, and to trust that we are capable of forming deeper, more fulfilling connections. Awareness, in this sense, is a tool for transformation. It gives us the power to rewrite the stories we've been living and to create new ones, stories of love, intimacy, and trust. Embracing vulnerability is perhaps one of the most powerful and challenging aspects of healing from avoidant attachment trauma. For those with this trauma, vulnerability often feels like an invitation to pain or rejection. It's a deeply ingrained belief that if we open up, we risk being hurt, that if we expose our true selves, others will disappoint us, withdraw from us, or, worse, abandon us. This fear leads to the instinct to withdraw, keep others at arm's length, and never truly let anyone in. However, what many people with avoidant attachment trauma don't realize is that this pattern of behavior keeps them trapped in a cycle of loneliness and emotional distance. Vulnerability is not about being weak or exposed. It is, in fact, a form of strength. It's the courage to be seen, to show up authentically, and to risk connecting with others in a meaningful way. Vulnerability is the key to forming deep, genuine relationships. It's when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable that we open the door to emotional intimacy, trust, and the kind of closeness that we all yearn for, but often fear. When we pull away and avoid vulnerability, we might feel safe in the short term, but we miss out on the richness of connection, the feeling of being truly understood, loved, and supported. For someone who has experienced avoidant attachment trauma, embracing vulnerability means slowly and intentionally learning to trust that opening up won't result in rejection. It's about acknowledging the fear that comes with intimacy and choosing to face it head on. When you begin to take these steps, you're not just confronting your fear of getting hurt, you're also teaching yourself that vulnerability is not a threat to your well-being. In fact, it's a pathway to greater emotional security. This process of embracing vulnerability begins with small, manageable steps. For example, it might mean sharing something personal with someone you trust, perhaps a feeling or a fear you've been holding on to. It could be as simple as allowing someone to comfort you when you're feeling down instead of shutting them out. Each small act of vulnerability builds your emotional muscles, making it easier to let down your guard and trust others. Over time, you begin to rewire your brain to associate vulnerability with connection rather than pain. It's also important to recognize that vulnerability is not about exposing everything all at once. It's about gradually revealing yourself in a way that feels safe and balanced. It's a process of learning how to be open without feeling overwhelmed by the risk. And while it may feel uncomfortable at first, the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. The key is to start with self-compassion, to recognize that vulnerability doesn't mean you're weak or needy, but rather that you are human and deserving of love, just as everyone else is. One of the greatest gifts of embracing vulnerability is that it allows you to experience the deep, fulfilling connections that we all crave. When we let down our emotional walls, we invite others in. And when we experience being seen and loved for who we truly are with all our imperfections, flaws, and fears, we learn to trust ourselves and others in a way that heals old wounds. Vulnerability is the foundation of true intimacy, and by practicing it, you begin to create the kinds of relationships that nurture your emotional growth, helping you overcome the trauma of avoidant attachment. Rewriting your story with self-compassion is a transformative aspect of healing from avoidant attachment trauma. For those who have been shaped by this trauma, the narrative they carry with them can often be one of pain, fear, and self-doubt. They may believe that they are unworthy of love, that their needs will never be met, or that emotional intimacy is too dangerous to pursue. This narrative, shaped by past experiences of rejection, neglect, or inconsistency in relationships, becomes a lens through which they view themselves and the world. The challenge is not just to heal from these past wounds, but to fundamentally change the story they've been telling themselves about their worth, their needs, and their capacity for love. The process of rewriting this narrative begins with recognizing that the story you've been living is not a reflection of who you truly are. It's a product of past experiences, often ones that were beyond your control. It's essential to understand that the hurtful beliefs formed from childhood or past relationships don't define you. They are simply old messages that no longer serve you. In fact, these beliefs were once protective mechanisms, ways to cope with the pain and uncertainty you experienced. But as an adult, you no longer need to hold onto these limiting beliefs. You have the power to rewrite the narrative, and in doing so, you free yourself from the chains of your past. Self-compassion is a critical element of this rewriting process. For many with avoidant attachment trauma, there's an inner critic that constantly reminds them of their perceived flaws, their inability to connect, or their fears of rejection. This self-criticism stems from the belief that they are somehow unworthy of love or incapable of forming healthy relationships. But to heal, it's crucial to challenge this inner voice and replace it with kindness, patience, and understanding. When you practice self-compassion, you begin to treat yourself with the same empathy and care that you would offer to a dear friend who is struggling. You recognize that you, like everyone else, are deserving of love and connection. You begin to forgive yourself for past mistakes, letting go of the guilt and shame that may have been holding you back. By replacing the harsh self-judgment with gentle encouragement, you begin to see yourself through a more compassionate lens. You start to recognize your strengths, your resilience, and your inherent worth. Rewriting your story also involves embracing your vulnerabilities and accepting that they do not diminish your value. For someone with avoidant attachment trauma, vulnerability often feels like a weakness, something to hide or suppress. However, as you rewrite your story, you come to realize that vulnerability is not a flaw but a strength. It's the ability to be open, honest, and true to yourself, even when it feels scary or uncomfortable. When you accept your vulnerabilities with compassion, you create space for growth, healing, and deeper connections. Another important aspect of rewriting your story is reframing your experiences. Instead of viewing past relationships or moments of emotional pain as evidence of your unworthiness, start to see them as opportunities for growth. Every challenge you've faced has taught you something valuable about yourself. Perhaps you've learned resilience, strength, or the importance of self-protection. These lessons are part of your journey, and they don't define your future. As you begin to rewrite your narrative, you also start to shift how you approach new relationships. You no longer operate from a place of fear or self-doubt, but from a place of confidence in your ability to navigate intimacy. You recognize that your past does not dictate your future, and that you are capable of forming healthy, fulfilling connections based on mutual trust and respect. With each step you take toward rewriting your story, you build a new identity, one that is rooted in self-compassion, self-worth, and the belief that you are deserving of love and happiness. In essence, rewriting your story is reclamation of your personal power. It's about taking ownership of your healing and choosing a new path forward, one where you embrace your true self, your needs, and your desires. Through this process, you move away from the limitations of the past and step into the possibility of a future filled with connection, love, and emotional freedom. In conclusion, healing from avoidant attachment trauma is a deeply transformative journey that requires patience, self-awareness, and a commitment to change. For those of us who have experienced the wounds of avoidant attachment, this journey is not just about mending the past, but reclaiming the power to build a future where love, trust, and emotional intimacy are possible. By acknowledging the patterns and behaviors that have shaped our relationships, we begin to unlock the potential for healing. Awareness is the first step in this process. For only when we understand why we act the way we do can we take active steps toward changing the narrative of our emotional lives. Recognizing these patterns is a powerful tool that sets us on a path to freedom, helping us recognize that these responses are not our true selves, but protective mechanisms that can now be released. Once we gain awareness, the next phase of healing is learning to embrace vulnerability. For those with avoidant attachment trauma, vulnerability often feels like an invitation to pain, rejection, or abandonment. Yet, vulnerability is the key to forming authentic connections we so deeply crave. By embracing vulnerability, we step into our emotional strength, realizing that it is through openness, authenticity, and emotional exposure that we create true intimacy with others. Vulnerability allows us to experience the deep human connection that we might have avoided for years, ultimately teaching us that allowing others in doesn't weaken us, but rather empowers us to experience the richness of human relationships. Vulnerability is the bridge that allows us to heal from past wounds and form deeper, more meaningful bonds with the world around us. Equally important in this healing journey is rewriting the stories we tell ourselves about our worth and our ability to connect. The narrative that stems from avoidant attachment trauma often includes beliefs that we are unworthy of love or that we will always be rejected if we expose our true selves. Rewriting this story is an act of self-compassion. It involves recognizing that our past does not define us and that we have the power to change the way we see ourselves. We begin to treat ourselves with kindness, understanding, and forgiveness, allowing us to release old narratives of fear and self-doubt. As we shift our inner dialogue, we create space for a new narrative, one that empowers us to believe in our own worthiness of love and connection, and in our ability to foster healthy, supportive relationships. As we take these steps, gaining awareness, embracing vulnerability, and rewriting our stories, we gradually create a new foundation for our relationships. This process allows us to break free from the patterns that have kept us emotionally distant and opens the door to more fulfilling connections with others. Healing from avoidant attachment trauma doesn't mean erasing the past or pretending it didn't happen. It means integrating those experiences into a more positive, empowering narrative. It means learning to trust again, not just others, but ourselves. It means accepting that emotional intimacy, connection, and vulnerability are not threats, but vital components of a well-rounded, joyful life. Ultimately, the journey of healing from avoidant attachment trauma is one of rediscovering our true selves, the parts of us that have been hidden behind emotional walls for far too long. It is about reclaiming the parts of our heart that have been shut off in fear and rediscovering the joy and fulfillment that comes from true human connection. This healing journey is not quick or easy, but it is absolutely worth it. It takes courage, but more than anything, it takes a commitment to ourselves. It's about choosing to believe that we are worthy of love, that we can build deep, meaningful relationships, and that we have the strength within us to heal. By walking this path, we not only heal our past, but create a future filled with the kind of emotional freedom that allows us to thrive in our connections and in our lives. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I hope this conversation has been valuable in shedding light on the process of healing from avoidant attachment trauma and providing insights that can support your personal growth. Remember, the journey toward healing and emotional freedom is unique for each of us, but with patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to embrace change, you can create the kind of deep, meaningful connections you deserve. Goodbye for now, and I wish you all the best on your healing journey. Keep moving forward with strength and love, and never hesitate to reach out whenever you need support. Take care and be kind to yourself.